Okay, it's not happening. It's not going. Oh, there it is. Okay, we're connected.
Okay.
Okay, it's not happening. It's not going. Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay, we're connected. This is wonderful. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone who's tuning in at Maria Hernandez Park right now. We're handing out some magazines. Our publication is finally out in the world. We're very excited for this panel. You can all hear me. I just want to thank everyone for being here. My name is Pablo Siles. I'm the artistic director for Creación. I'm so thrilled to have Natalia Rosa-Salas join us to moderate this wonderful panel with wonderful artists. And also I want to thank our ASL interpreters for joining us. We have a short clip to show these works to get into who they are and where they're coming from. And I'll share that with you right now.
Nuestro pensamiento es algo que nuestros ancestros comenzaron.
Puerto Rico quiso ser autónomo y no se lo permitieron. Con el grito, es que no pudo ser independiente a partir del grito del ARE, pero logró convertirse, obtuvo su autonomía del gobierno español, pero Estados Unidos no se lo permitió.
Thank you so much for that video trailer that you made, Juan Pablo. I really appreciate it. I wish we had, well, we will have more time to get into all of the artists' practices who will be sharing with us this evening. Just want to reiterate again my gratitude for being part of this virtual gathering. Thank you, Juan Pablo, for the invitation. It's an honor to be in conversation with all of this kin. Before we get started with the conversation, I wanted to begin with a land acknowledgement. I know that we are all situated on the ancestral homelands of different people, but currently where I am is I'm in Brooklyn, New York, which is on Lenape-Hoking, which are the ancestral homelands of the Lenape people. And I just want to begin our virtual gathering by honoring the Lenape people, past, present, and future, and their continuing presence across the Lenape diaspora. I also want to pay respects to Indigenous and First Nations people across Turtle Island who have been forcibly displaced from what is now called the Americas. I also want to pay my gratitude and respects to African descended peoples also forcibly brought here due to the slave trade, and mourn the loss of all of our kin through that process as well. I want to take another moment before we get the conversation started to have a moment of silence for all of our kin that we've lost due to COVID-19, which is ravaging the globe at the moment. And we know that this pandemic has disproportionately impacted Black and Latinx folks And so I just want to take a moment of silence to just honor the lives that we've lost due to this pandemic. Thank you. Thank you very much. It does seem like we are living in quite apocalyptic times that are of cinematic proportions, it seems, at least in my lifetime. And of course, as I already mentioned, and we've taken a moment of silence for, we're facing this global pandemic that's infecting thousands by the day, climate disasters, economic corruption that's impelling all of these forced migrations of humans and non-humans alike, political uprisings that are happening all over the world that are really calling systems of power to task to fundamentally change what they do and how they do it. And I think this conversation today, I look forward to speaking and hearing from all of the artists who are gathered in this virtual space, sort of grapple with these questions around how this political moment is sort of shaping who we are and what we make and why. It's important, of course, to mention, and it must be mentioned from the outset, that all of the artists that are gathered here today are of Puerto Rican descent. And our homeland is no stranger to pandemic in particular. The arrival of European colonists on what is now called Puerto Rico in the 1500s introduced the first ever smallpox pandemic to the Americas. And so then, of course, the subsequent European colonization of the island has cultivated environmental and political and cultural exploitation and extraction that we're still navigating and fighting against to this day. The ideas and the experiences and the experimentation and the exploitation due to medical apartheid and environmental racism, colonial leadership models, have shaped Puerto Rican identity politics from Borinquen to the Bronx. And so often during these times, particularly now, I think folks look to the role of the artist to try to help us navigate creative solutions to these cyclical, toxic problems. And so today I'm really, really, really honored and excited and thrilled to be in conversation with Mobey Irizarry, Custodio, Natalia Lassalle-Morillo, and Poncili Creación. Today, we're going to be speaking together about the roles and responsibilities, the bounds and the limitations of artistic practice to navigate this political moment. And I think there's a breadth of ancestral knowledge, there's a breadth of embodied experience of navigating all of the issues that I've mentioned in my remarks. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what y'all have to say. And to begin, we're gonna open up the space and have each of the panelists speak to 3 to 5 minutes about their practice, particularly focusing on this question that I'll share with all of us who are tuning in. So the question that I asked our panelists to reflect on as they're sharing with us about their work is, what do you believe is the role or duty of your artistic practice in service of political change? And how does your relationship to Puerto Rico in particular and its diasporas inform what you make and how you make it? So with all that being said, I'm going to put myself on mute and I'm going to invite Mobey to share about their practice. Mobey, whenever you're ready.
Hi, thank you, Ali. Thank you, Juan Pablo and Monica and all the artists that are sharing, and Brett. So my name is Mobey Irizarry. I use the pronouns they, them, and theirs. I'm a Puerto Rican and Chickasaw video artist, composer, and musician from Hartford, Connecticut. I make pop music under the name Bebe Machete. And so thinking about the role and duty of my art practice in service of political change, I've always thought that what I can share with my audiences is a space to witness, imagine, and feel liberation. And I think liberation looks like a lot of things, but in my mind today, it specifically is a world without colonialism, without capitalism, without policing, without gendered violence, and without white supremacy. So one of the pieces that I have featured in this series is a video called Vroom, which was at the beginning of the trailer, a segment of it. So Vroom takes the motorcycle caravan protest led by Ray Charlie during the protests against Ricardo Rosselló last summer as a jumping off point to reflect on colonialism and practices of resistance that were happening in 2019. And I was especially thinking about Puerto Rico, but also Santiago, Chile, and the uprising that was happening there. And this video is originally meant to be for 5.1 surround sound and a bassoon trio spaced out through the audience, but for the sake of this series, it lives in stereo and purely recorded. So halfway through that video, I posed the question, no colony, a world without blank. And it's like that is written out on the screen, and there's a bracket with just blank. And I just leave it there for about a minute. And I pair that image with the sounds of me inhaling as if I'm about to say something. So I'll be like, you know, but I never actually get to say what I am trying to say. And that moment is really meant to force the viewer to imagine what we would need to leave behind in a world without colonialism, but it also viscerally embodies the discomfort and fear that comes with imagining the abolition of colonialism and also building and bringing in some new, unknown, ambiguous, and inevitably messy form of liberation. So while Vroom is a relatively grim video, in my musical practice as Bebe Machete, I often try to pair talking about violence with rhythmic and melodic sensations of joy. That can mean major keys and upbeat tempos. It doesn't have to, but I have a song called Davido, which is off my last album called There Is Not a Metaphor That Can Contain. And in the song, I talk about losing contact with my sister, my grandparents, and my cousins for weeks after Hurricane Maria, which I know is a shared experience for many Puerto Ricans living in the United States during the storm. And you know, the experience of reading news article after news article that was talking about the death and destruction happening on the island while concurrently not being able to get in touch with my loved ones. This was like a terrible and traumatic experience. But when I sing about it, I'm singing about it in an upbeat way, and the song is a dance song. It's meant for people to dance to. And I think that contributes to a practice of resilience in Puerto Rican music across generations, you know, talking about hard and terrible shit, but in a way that makes you want to dance. As a musician, I'm offering catharsis to my audience. I'm also offering catharsis to myself. Every time I play that song, I connect with that experience, that painful experience, but I also experience joy. So I've heard a lot of people talk about the Afro-Brazilian genre samba as a sorrow that dances. And I'd say that resonates with Puerto Rican music as well as genres across the African diaspora. Resilience is an integral human need for populations that have experienced legacies and realities of colonialism, enslavement, sexual violence, and so on. And I don't want to romanticize this notion of resilience either. It's not romantic that colonized people perpetually must be resilient in order to survive. But at the end of the day, in terms of my own art practice, like, this is what I do. I make art for people to heal and process their trauma, and I make art for people to imagine and feel liberation and be prepared to fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mobey. Thank you. Kai, are you ready to share with us about your practice in response to the question I posed?
So thank you so much for this beautiful opportunity to like meet y'all. Like you're really awesome and talented. Like this is like a great moment to share together, which makes this like Creación is like such an integral part of like visibility, like part of like the role and practice that I do is like trying to have some sort of visibility, given, you know, being that, you know, I'm queer, trans, you know, my heritage is Puerto Rican, I'm Peruvian, my parents met in Brooklyn, you know, so, you know, my father had like immigrated here and like, my mom, you know, she got here like, you know, like probably in her teens and, you know, just trying to like connect to that past so that kind of like can inform like, you know, like a kind of centeredness, like a connectedness with heritage and like knowing like your ancestral like past. And that's something that like I gravitate towards and I find healing, trying to like work through it with sound. And it's like ever evolving just to make like these sounds and like connect, you know, with like my Afro-Indigenous like background as well, which is like, I feel like there's so much to uncover. Also like in speaking with, you know, like the indigenous people of Puerto Rico, the Tainos, you know, like trying to you know, find like what's left of them. And like, there's like some sort of paper erasure that had happened, which I'm not sure, like we could discuss that. Like, I'd love to have a discussion about that because it's really interesting as to how like there is like this erasure and like we need to keep going in order to like show that we're here, we matter, and, you know, like I'm glad that you said, Ali, that we're like on the Lenape like land, sacred land. It's good to shout these things out and you know, to not forget. And so that's part of like what I do with like my practice is like trying to get that connectedness. In terms of like my relationship with Puerto Rico, it's like I was born here, and you know, part of me is, you know, connected to Puerto Rico, and so there's like this kind of feeling like of complexity of like not feeling like you're either part of either region, you know, either place. Like you feel like an outcast in either like place. Like when I would go like visit family, you know, they would look at me like I'm, you know, like really strange, you know, like I'm not, you know, I was wearing like baggy jeans or something, like, ¿por qué está, you know, like, why are you wearing that? You know, like you're supposed to wear these things or whatever, like these expectations. And then coming here, like coming back here and like not also fitting in, like say school system, you know, like, which is pretty ridiculous, right? Like growing up, it's always like, I was like the different person, you know? And it's sad to say this, and it still is today because of like the situations that we are faced with constantly. It's like when I was a kid going to school in Brooklyn, like wearing a Puerto Rican flag around my neck, you know, just being proud of like, you know, my heritage. I was told not to wear that because then, you know, then I wouldn't be called a, you know, pardon, a spick. I wouldn't be called a spick because then, you know, like I shouldn't be wearing these things, you know, so it's my fault, you know, for being who I am and wearing the things that, you know, I want to wear and celebrate, you know, our culture. You know, it's really unfortunate that it's perpetuated in this system. So, so with my video, like I wanted to show like a journey of like my Peruvian and Puerto Rican like heritage, and just like kind of like break through like the first layer, kind of, as to like, this is a part of who I am. This is like where I come from, you know, this beautiful, lush, you know, green, like fruitful land, and also fruitful, like on the other side, like, and desert as well. And just like being able to like show the importance of like passing along like the ancestral like traditions, the communities, like having, you know, some sort of discussion to keep like our past alive. Because I feel like now that we're at this point with like the pandemic, maybe it's a good time to like reflect on like who we are inside as a people, and be brave to do so, you know, like, or not, you don't have to, like, you don't have to, like, however, but like this time was given to us to like, I feel like, to reflect and to really like strengthen ourselves, because what was working, supposedly working before, is not working. And we're at this point of like, we're pivoting, we're changing, and you know, there's something else that is ahead. So maybe some of the answers, you know, we can find them like through connecting with our ancestral heritage, our ancestors, and get that message like through like any spiritual means. Like I try to, you know, meditate and, you know, light candles, things like that, just to like try to open up the channel of communication to ancestors. So that's like part of my practice. Thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you so much, Kai. Thank you for sharing. Really appreciate it. Oh, I love hearing the honking horns here in New York. Natalia, are you ready to share a bit about you and your practice with us?
Yes. Hello.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, everybody else who's speaking. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Juan Pablo, for being resilient through all of this and still having something happen. My name is Natalia Lassalle-Morillo. I'm a theater director, performance maker, filmmaker, installation maker, educator. I move around a lot from mediums. And I was born and raised in Bayamón, Puerto Rico. I'm currently speaking to you from Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico. And my work focuses, of course, mainly in the intersection of all these mediums and sort of questioning liveness and permanence, and how these two offer something to the viewer that one cannot. But most recently, I think the work that I've been doing in the past 5 years melts fiction, melts documentary, melts archival documentation, and also melts canonical texts in a means to kind of disrupt all of the ways that we can take in narrative and reconstruct an idea of what history is. I think I sort of ended up doing or focusing or thinking about my work in this way accidentally. But now, as time passes by and I reflect on it, I realize that it emerges from, you know, this, I think when you grow up in Puerto Rico, the history that you learn is not, you don't be, like, I think I actually started learning Puerto Rican history after my 20s, because you really don't, you absorb a different way, you absorb history in a different way. And when you realize, oh, all the history that I've been intaking is written by the colonizer, then I really need to understand what is my history. But then it places you in a position where you don't know what's true or not true. So a lot of the work that I've been doing has been in creating a kind of like an archive of history. I work a lot, I collaborate a lot with non-actors. And from there, building a new idea or a new perspective of truth, because what is truth, and who am I to say that your truth is not valid and my truth is valid and the historical truth is valid? So that is something that I'm interested with all of the different mediums that I work in. I think in the past, the project that I'm working on now, which is a project that partly is part of the series of Regiones, is a project that is ever changing, but that I'm finally getting a hold of, and it's called Conversations on Tragedy. And this project uses Greek tragedies as sort of like a meeting place or a forum to unite different perspectives of being a Puerto Rican or understanding what it means to be a Puerto Rican. The reason why I've been interested in Greek tragedies is because after studying them deeply, I realized that there's something about this text being the oldest text that we have access to, and it being considered this traditional text, but it really is not. And what the Greek tragedy navigates is something that I automatically was able to adhere to the experience of being in Puerto Rico and living in a constant state of disorientation and chaos. And, you know, with my friends, I'm living right now with a couple of artists who are based in Puerto Rico. And we'll be talking about how in Puerto Rico, there's this accumulation of disaster, accumulation of phenomena that is not only, you know, the debt, it's not only the economic crisis, it's not only the constant natural disasters that we're facing, but it's sort of this displacement, the fact that there is a part of us that lives outside, most of the island lives outside of the island. And this project particularly deals with creating a forum. The Greek tragedy served for the Greeks as this collective forum where the people that went to war and the people that stayed were able to have catharsis together and sort of create an idea of like, this is the collective story and this is what we're gonna believe. So I've been thinking about that mainly because I do feel that this accumulation, my friend calls it the sedimentation of tragedy or disaster, has created a new consciousness in the Puerto Rican person. And I think all of my work focuses with people on the island. I worked a lot with my mother and sort of rewriting Puerto Rican history through her experience of being, you know, a woman who kind of went through the Commonwealth and the failure of the Commonwealth. So I'm interested now in seeing how, as I believe that we need to reimagine what this place is. We can't keep saying that we're a colony because we already know that we're a colony, so what we can do. I believe that there's potential to intersect all of these other perspectives that I don't know. Like the Puerto Ricans that left to New York, the Puerto Ricans that left to Buffalo, the Puerto Ricans that live in Orlando, which is right now is the biggest wave that has moved to the United States in the past 5 years, pre-Maria and post-Maria. So that is a lot of what I'm interested in. How do all these moving parts connect and create this new consciousness? And I feel that, you know, thinking about your question, I could go so many directions, but since we all have a connection to the island, I think that's during the past couple of months where everything has sort of hit a standstill, I've been thinking about clarifying intention and really thinking about active work. And in Puerto Rico, how do we move past resilience, like Mobey said, and actually start thinking about how we can reimagine? And it's I hope we can talk about it because it's easy to talk about it. It's easy to have a forum, but it's very difficult to actually do it. And I think part of what I'm thinking with the projects that I'm doing is how I can dig up history and realign it to a truth that can serve me and can serve my mom and can serve potentially my children one day. But thank you, and I'll pass it along to Pablo.
Thank you so much, Natalia. And I really hope to get to everything that you were speaking to in a few moments. Pablo and Efrain, are y'all ready to share with us?
Hi there. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us thank you for reinventing the festival completely and still delivering something absolutely interesting. It's all about transformation and having an open mind to the future. So that's good we're here.
We're two persons, so it's gonna be a little bit more awkward than the other persons that have speaked already. We're gonna try to do this. I talk a little bit and he talks a little bit, and then I talk a little bit and he talks a little bit. I just wanted to say that just not to talk a lot about our work, but we work with images. So we are performance artists that are also sculptures that do like big productions. We also do a lot of outside street work with our masks and our like very big props. And I just wanted to mention like the importance for us of like what this world of like images and ideas, talking about art and beyond art, has an impact on the everyday life. And I always say like this thing of like seizing those means, you know, like kind of like grabbing back all of this like power that has been embedded through the whole media and the whole internet, this power that has been embedded into like the moving pictures, the images, what you see on the TV, what you see in the
big, the bright, the colorful.
And part of our work is sort of like taking this like huge power of like funky, cute, quirky, you know, like beautifulness, and sort of like turning it into like a malleable weapon, as to say that we can use as the people. We work a lot with trash. Most of our things we get out of trash, and we don't work too much on them. We like to keep it like just something that you can see you could do it yourself, but at the same time, just focus on the creative input that is put into it. So a lot of our like scheme of thought is to inspire people. It's one of the main components of our work, so that it's accessible to everyone. We don't like making like posh art or perfectionist art or something that if you see it, you might feel like you'll never be as good as us or something like that. We're very interested in people seeing it and saying like, I could do that. You know, like I could express myself in a big, bright, colorful way like that. And what we're working with Regiones right now is some like files that we have of some iterations we've done in the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which happens in New York. It holds thousands of people, and we've been working with like, it's like a huge dome celebration that has a lot to do, because we're not celebrating anything. We really don't have a lot to celebrate. Actually,
that's the name of one of the iterations we did, is Nada que celebrar. It's called Nothing to Celebrate.
And we feel like this was something that was like mostly ruled by corporations that had like big corporation floats of like DirecTV and Coors Light, and everybody just like waving the flags and screaming. And we said like, let's insert like this like very solemn march, you know, like sort of like saying like, look, colonialism is real, you know, like corruption is very real in Puerto Rico. And also all of the things that you guys have mentioned, which I don't like saying like, oh, I don't like talking about like the hurricane or the earthquakes or COVID, because it's not about that really. You know, it was completely.
It's about the infrastructure that sustains that.
And like the injustice existed before Hurricane Maria, you know, and like I'm saying like it's totally valid to talk about Hurricane Maria. It's very important in our history. I'm just saying that it was super unfair before Hurricane Maria. Like that just like heightened it. But it was always like that. And we've been like protesting. We've actually done 3 iterations, like 3 years in a row. We've like gone to the parade and done like our very like different, but like same solemn march with funeral drums throughout the parade. Thinking about a lot of the documentation that we're gonna use is like newspaper articles and things that sprouted and used our photos of the things that we were doing because they were like catchy or, you know, like creative or however you want to call it. But we're interested in this aspect of like how creative protest can impact the world. And it's something that is very interesting because it can be done by the individual. When you do a creative protest, just like it happened when they outed Ricky, the governor, our corrupt governor, one of them, it was like the person that did the motorcycle thing, it was Ray Charlie. The person that did the perreo combativo, it was one collective that did it. Different from the yoga protest collective, different from the people that went on horses to protest. So it's this thing where like, it's a hydra, you know, like you can't pinpoint the head. Everybody was moving, doing their creative practices, and nobody could stop them because it was like, it didn't have a head. It was just like this creative flow of ideas that had a huge political influence. And we are very interested in this and been working with this for several years. And I feel just wanted to mention part of our practice is just sort of to inspire people to do these kind of things and know that it's accessible to them.
Yeah, it's really important to think of art in any medium, but also of any kind of expression as a means of like empowering people and like dream sprouting, you know, and like just changing people's consciousness and views about how much can they alter reality and how much is their commitment worth, even if it's a tiny thing. And the reason we think is like important to talk about what we do in the Puerto Rican Day Parade is because being Puerto Rican, being Latinx right now doesn't only mean to be from Puerto Rico or to be from Latin America. We are talking about something that is almost global now, because we have a reach of different and completely isolated Puerto Rican people that live in so many different diasporas that live in so many different parts together. And Puerto Rico is the thing that joins us, you know, and it's happening right now, even in this conversation. And for us, it's like super interesting to talk about the island, even to talk about the island to some of these people, especially in the Puerto Rican Day Parade, because most of them don't even realize what's really happening over here, and especially the parade we did in the year just after Maria had happened. You know, like it was a complete full-blown celebration, waving Puerto Rican flags. And I understand that, but also it's kind of outrage. It's like, you know, like it's so much injustice has just happened against our country, and it's like they're throwing a party celebrating a country that is like really like dire need of help, without talking about, you know, like the money that is going into this parade and like made because of it, like huge amounts of cash that obviously end everywhere except Puerto Rico. So we just thought it's important to put a sour note there, but also you know, like to educate those people, you know, instilling is not instilling sadness, but it's maybe instilling like a conscious about what's happening, and that is also an important role of art and activism. You know, like it's not only empowering, it's also like communicating to some people that maybe they should care.
Yeah, just to wrap it up about Puerto Rico and our direct relationship, which is, you know, we've lived here all of our lives, and we've, you know, grown here, thrived here, and I feel like people always say like, oh, Puerto Ricans are resilient. I heard it was mentioned, and I feel like Natalia was talking about like the post-resilience, you know, like what's gonna happen after. And I also want to talk about like what Mobey said about you know, like the happiness juxtaposed to the sorrow and the protest and everything that has like waited on us of colonialism. And just wanted to mention that I feel like those are things that we're also sort of on the same boat, you know. And I feel like is this like the blooming, the post, you know, resistance blooming now, which is more like looking ways, you know, to strive and survive and also be happy and have fun and exists, you know. And I feel like
right now more than ever, like with the situation that the world is having, and living in Puerto Rico right now is a very special moment where there is really only one way out, and it's like a complete reinvention of what the future can be. And I feel like definitely what we are trying to do and what our sculptures and our object work out on the street can help us do is bring that community together, which is I think what we're all trying to do with history and with music and with video is getting those communities to connect and to pave a way ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Efrain and Pablo. And I want to kind of jump right on a common theme that I think all of y'all have addressed in your sharings, which is this real desire for considering how your work and your personhood is like existing in relationship to reinvention and reimagining of what life could look like, of what like a nationhood could look like, what relationship to artistic practice, to diaspora, to land. And I heard that word come up again and again, this idea of reinvention, reimagining. And it has me thinking a lot about in this particular historical moment that we're living in, especially because all of us are now more than ever really living online. And the ways in which digital communications have been used politically, I think by each of you as artists in your own way, the utilization of digital media, it has been really important in a lot of ways to each of your practice and the sharing of it or in working with it as a medium. But also I think just politically, the ways in which popular media, there's been a lot of conversation around fake news and how social media has really worked to proliferate news that's not real, or the advent of these deep fakes, or the ways in which, you know, programmers are using technology in order to like manipulate facts. And I think that's, of course, that's been a real question that's come up, you know, with coronavirus, with Hurricane Maria, with all the major disasters that have been happening within the last like 5 years. But I think it proposes this really interesting tension or set of questions around, and I think Natalia spoke to it too, the role of truth making and myth, and what is myth and what is fact, what is true and what is real. And I'm just really interested in like how artistic practice works to question that binary of what's real and what's not real. So I think in a conversation around reimagining, reinventing what it is that we want to see for the world that we want to live in, I'm wondering for each of you, kind of what's that relationship between myth and truth, and how do you navigate those two concepts in your artistic practice? I think particularly in this political moment when the idea of what's real and what's fake is kind of always up for grabs. So whoever wants to begin by sharing can go ahead and talk.
I can go. I mean, I think, so, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's mainly because of how much I love theater. You know, in theater, there's this phrase that is like the suspension of disbelief. And it's like, how much can you suspend somebody's attention until they realize, wait, this is not real? That has really triggered me to thinking, relating that to what I said earlier, our relationship to history. And I think in general, I've just become very skeptical about how I know the government is probably lying to me. I know there's too much information that we're kind of receiving at the same time, especially now, because like you said, we are living online. So I think personally, I've been trying to become very intentional and very acute about the information that I intake. Like I've been curating the information that I absorb, which is opposite of what I used to do before, which was just, I want to live in this chaos. I want to live in injecting, and that's sort of where this generation is leading me. The moment is leading me to inject, and it has transformed in that way, mainly because with what I've been thinking about making, it has been a lot about how can I intentionally redirect a person's understanding of an idea, of a consciousness, as a feeling. for me, myth comes from the belief of something, and as long as you believe in something, who am I to say that it is true or it's not true? So for me, that's how I try to navigate it. Not really thinking that somebody's perspective or somebody's narrative is better than others, but understanding that they're all valid. I think about that a lot when I meditate on what Fran Pablo were saying earlier, like Puerto Rico has become this consciousness that exists everywhere. And who am I to say that one perspective of being from this place is higher or is a hierarchy? Like me being here, I know more. No, I don't. I have a totally different experience. And I think I can easily translate that to distancing myself from the border of the island and thinking of humanity in that way. Yeah, I think I'll pass it along.
So when you posed that question about myth making, it immediately made me think of speculation and the practice of speculation, especially when it like contemporary myth making. So I use the word speculation referring to speculative fiction and like Octavia Butler, and I'm currently reading Rita Indiana's La Mucama de Omikunle, which is another work of speculative fiction. But I think myth making contemporaneously and speculation allows artists and viewers and listeners to witness something outside of the status quo. I wish I had a better word than the status quo, but and in doing so, after witnessing that, like artists and viewers and so on come back to business as usual and witness it as being more unnatural. I think some of the ways in which white supremacy, colonialism, and patriarchy cement themselves is by claiming to be natural. So by creating myth and by speculating like what other modes of relating with people, I think it really destabilizes like one of the fundamental qualities of colonialism and how it sustains itself.
Yeah, with the question, it got me thinking about intention, and Natalia was saying like a lot with like intention, and I think like myth and truth, like it's basically, for me, it's like what is the intention behind either, and like it could just blur because it also comes to like truth, and like no one is like less than the other, you know, like it's, you know, somebody's truth, you know, and basically if the intention, like for instance, like Poncili was like, you know, they said like for the Puerto Rican Day Parade, you know, we're bringing a sour note to like this celebration, but like, you know, there's tangibility of like, there's some real stuff that's going on. And like, what is the intention? It's like to make people know that this is happening too, you know? And I think that is something that like with art practice is, you know, asking myself in particular is like, what is the intention like behind what I'm making? Like, is it for healing? Is it for, you know, whatever? So that's something that came to mind with that question. And thank you for posing it.
Absolutely. No, thank you for your answer. I really like, Mobey, when you were speaking to about well, first Kai, you speaking about intention, and I think that's, you know, directly relating to both of what Natalia and Mobey were speaking about around like speculation and this idea that many truths can exist at once, and the idea of the concept of natural in and of itself, the ways in which that has been and continues to be weaponized in all ways, in terms of our relationship to the island, whether that's, you know, New York City, Lenape Hoken, whether that's Borinquen, Puerto Rico, the use of that that term natural in particular, I think is like is triggering, and there's a lot of historical trauma laden in that. So I was really interested in sort of the ways in which artistic practice works to sort of pull away and destabilize. And Natalia, you said that suspension of disbelief, or that suspension of belief, and just like the political potency of that work, of that suspension of disbelief, and what happens when that suspension happens, and kind of the possibilities that can be navigated due to that, is I think is a way in which artistic practice, particularly in this point in time, can offer these speculative realities that is really challenging for people to, and even for myself, of course, to imagine living in a world that's radically different than the one that we're existing in now. I don't know, Efrain and Pablo, did you have anything to say to that question in particular? Or, I think we're almost at time. We have 10 minutes, so I could ask another question, but I want to see if you all had any thoughts about that one.
We'll say it real quick, okay?
No, yeah, it's just, it's very important what Kai said about intention, because that leads me straight to thinking, like, if there's an intention, there's a creator. Like, who creates myths, who creates truths, and why, which is what you were just saying now, of how people use this as manipulation techniques. And I think the very important thing here is to subvert that, like, for us to, like, people can use that from our point of view, from the artist, from the underdog, creating our own myths, our own heroes, like stuff that happened in the protest last summer and stuff like that. Those are myths, like, those are things that are truths, know. And no, just a comment on the deep fakes, like all the information on COVID, like the people that don't believe in masks, the people that believe in masks, like, this is just a new reality and a challenge for the artist and the human as well. And it really is, it's kind of like a prompt to, like, just like be more educated. Maybe we need to learn about science and all of us, but it's a thing that if everything's gonna be more fake, all of us need to be more truth. Like, we need to, like, maybe we need to understand the world around us instead of having someone feeding it to us. Like, maybe that's what the world is calling for.
Yeah. Just 3 seconds. I feel like, everything is real under reality, in the means that it has a cause and effect, even though, again, it can be fake news or have a cause and effect. It will affect the world. We are at a junction, a juxtaposition of sorts, where we have all the means of production and all the technology to live in this, like, beautiful, like utopia, and I feel like everything now is about that. It's about, like, look, we have everything to have an utopia.
That's why people are saying, like, billionaires shouldn't exist and stuff like that.
Because we're at the point where, like, we can finally see it, like, it could be made, and it just is not being made because of the idea war. And I always say, like, we need magicians, we need superheroes, like, this is the moment, to let all that raw, beautiful, and I feel like, in a way, I wish all those things were real, and I'm not saying they're not, but in my own meditation, I say, like, those are artists. That's the artists. Those are gonna be our superheroes. Those
magicians.
are our idea people. That are gonna, like, solve this puzzle. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. And I think I'm just gonna check. I asked Juan Pablo if there was a possibility for folks to ask questions. There is a possibility. So, Juan Pablo, if there are questions, if you could send them to me in the chat and I can ask them, but I do want to just ask one more question before that. I'm really curious in this moment. I mean, we can just look back, I think for me, time isn't linear. And we know that the ways in which we're living are not new, even though I think the advent of the kind of technology that we're navigating brings up particular concerns and particular ways of living. But I'm just curious in relationship to who you are as people and as artists, and to kind of bring, there have been a lot of conversation too, I think, in what everyone's been saying about a family, ancestral lineage, or on history. And I'm just curious to hear more from each of you about who are those folks or those moments in history, those artists, those sources of inspiration that you're looking to right now? Who are those people, places, or things that are sources of inquiry, of inspiration, of questioning? Because I mean, I would definitely want to know, but I'm sure that a lot of folks tuning in would be interested to kind of hear the broader context of who you're kind of calling into the proverbial room, so to speak, when you're making and doing what you do.
So first off, I think of a lot of musicians, like especially boogaloo and salsa artists like Celia Cruz and La Lupe and Ismael Rivera and Eddie Palmieri. I no longer think of Willie Colon because fuck him, but but some another like ancestor that I really think about, specifically being a Puerto Rican from Hartford, is I don't know if y'all are familiar with Los Macheteros. They were a militant revolutionary group, independentistas, who in the 80s staged like the biggest cash robbery in U.S. history in Hartford. And yeah, and like I can walk to where they robbed Wells Fargo from my house. And they, among other things, like I mean, they use most of their funds to like fund the militia, but they also bought a bunch of toys for Three Kings Day and like gave them out for free in Pope Park, which is at the center of Frog Hollow, which is the historically Puerto Rican neighborhood in Hartford. And that's a tradition that still goes on to this day. That was 1983, and like in January of 2020, they were doing it. And it's something that I like went to as a kid. So those are ancestors that I'm definitely channeling.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Folks, people's, places, and things that you're calling in. And as whoever wants to talk is talking, I think we have some questions and comments I'm going to take a look at really quickly.
I can speak. I mean, I think that is constantly changing. For me, I think every time I'm at the island, I think there's something that happens to me when I'm here, because I'm always flying around. I'm half here and half elsewhere. So I think literally being here, and I think when I get to PR, there's like a gravitational shift that happens where I just weigh more. So that shifts a lot of things in my body. But I honestly feel like for me, my family, it's very basic. It's family and people that I meet on the street. It's people that are living their life every day, I think, for me, make me think beyond myself. If I were to look at the past, I recently discovered this sort of family genealogical tree that traces my father's family back to Haiti. So that has been really like something that I've been thinking about a lot, and understanding the connection to the Caribbean, not only this island, but also how the Caribbean does not connect with itself, but we used to connect to ourselves. And in reference to that, I've been reading a lot about Haitian Voodoo. I've been reading this beautiful book that Maya Deren wrote about Haitian Voodoo and her experience going to Haiti, which I think is actually a really amazing book to read if you are a person who makes anything, because it's not that much about it is a lot about the religious system and cosmological system, but it's really a lot about being a good listener and a good observer, and being present to just observe phenomena happen in front of you. And instead of thinking of manipulation, how can I manipulate it? How can I allow it to exist? And how my presence alone can change that. So those are things that are navigating.
Thank you so much. Kai or Efrain and Pablo to close us out. I do want to say before one of y'all speaks, we did get a comment from someone watching, a Rolando Lopez. We have everything we need for utopia. We need magicians. Well, that's lovely.
Definitely magicians are key to the next chapter. Yeah, like and I feel like with doing like my practice, like sound, being a musician, and like trying to do like also visual work, like I try to set up like in like a ritual sense, just like set like an intention of like, let like whatever, energy flow through to like create, because often at times for me, it's like, it's like a complex kind of like battle, because like I search for like that connection with like, say my grandmother, that she like passed like so many years ago, or like my grandfather who, in Puerto Rico, like he was descendant from the African slave trade, and just trying to like dig up more of like that history, and like just feel like that, that's part of the story, that's part of like roots, and being able to tap into that and work through like generational traumas and stuff, and like try to center it in that sense of like, this is, a time to just release whatever creativity and not, judge it and stuff, which is really hard because we're often like trained in a sense to like constantly judge like everything, because like, messaging when you grow up, it's like, this isn't good enough. You're not like this particular kind of person, like the pedestal, which is like very much, it's rooted in like that white supremacy that's here, so it's like trying to like battle that and push through like all those negative, cyclical, like you were saying, Ali, like that cycle of toxicity that is so prevalent and perpetuated, and we're trying to like break through that. So that's like something that, it's constantly like on my mind, and trying to like break through that cycle.
Thanks so much, Efrain and Pablo. Final thoughts.
I just wanted to reiterate, we personally have been thinking a lot about the people. I know that you specifically maybe asked about the ancestors, but I'm feeling very thrilled about like right now, all those protests that were going on around the world. It's like massive, we've had enough awakening. I feel that is definitely a wave that we are ipso facto riding right now, as a collective consciousness.
Something to look at.
And that I feel like it's something that is very powerful. And I'm thinking that, like Violeta Parra, which obviously is like this amazing human being. And she was asked a question of like, what will you keep? Like your embroideries, the music, the tours, what will you keep? Like if you could only have one thing. And she was like, the people. I want to have the people. And I feel like that is something super important, because it's just this real humanity which we are walking towards, I feel, which is like a more decentralized thing, as whereas of like the artist, like the person. It's more like, no, we are something and we will make something.
I think we are at a point into like years and years of society where like kind of like the general identity, kind of like this collective consciousness, kind of Natalia was talking around a little bit, it's kind of blurred, in general, like for humanity. And I think it's something like to be equally fascinated by. Like for me, like the things that really fascinate me are definitely like the past and the future. Like right now, to look forward, like artists to look forward to is like the ancestors, people that knew how to live with the natural resources. That's what everyone needs right now, to learn how to live with the natural resources, to learn how to use things without wasting them. Like those are the things that are needed right now for resilience, for survival. Like this is major, like this is what we need. And it's definitely a moment to look back at our ancestors, but at the same time, all this new technologies, drones, deep fakes, you know, like radars, like memes, all these things are like, that's our culture now.
Yeah, which is a lot of thinking also about like the whole thing of like the speculative thing. We've worked with calling it speculative alchemy, working with like, you know, how us like mundane human beings can like dwell into magic through art.
And also like create transformation, in like bring transformation to reality and like impact what's happening around us. I
wanted to say two names of people that I've been like lately thinking about if people want to research. One person is Tito Kayak. He's this prominent protester from Puerto Rico that he does like crazy stunts to bring like the public eye into like knowing about like different things that are happening in the island. He has made protests on kayaks. He has like climbed giant cranes.
He hung like a giant Vieques flag and a Puerto Rican flag of the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah,
in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And he's also, no, just to mention, he's the leader of Ocean Conservation Society for years. He was the leader of a camp that happened here to stop the building of hotels in the beach in Isla Verde. And he's also like a super prominent electrician.
Yeah,
and he's a very interesting character as a person.
And I've been thinking a lot about him because he's one guy, you know, and he's like made like social change throughout putting his body into like insane and hard circumstances. But for me, he's got, you know, Marina Abramovic ain't got nothing on him. Mm-hmm. You know, this guy climbs 200 feet to protest this injustice that is happening to his people. And he's just one guy thinking about the superheroes and the magicians.
Yeah, and he did this decoy once where like a kayak came out and the cops caught the kayak and it wasn't him and he had like escaped on a helicopter.
So he's kind of like you know, he's got the tricks.
Superhero,
yeah.
Superhero material.
And this other one, I'm also just, my idea was I was gonna just say the name so like y'all can research them if you're interested. The other person is from New York. It's called Sardulu, and she's the person that claims to be behind the Pixar Rat video. So she says she is a myth maker and she creates contemporary myths throughout trained animals. So her artwork,
or also like taxidermy animals.
Yeah, so her artwork is viral videos basically, and they state that the important part is that a passerby, like a unknown everyday Joe or Jeanette, captures the image, and that the image is relating to the people by a common buyer, like by another person, and that's what makes it a myth. That it wasn't like her that showed it to the world as an artist, if not someone stumbled upon it. And I just want to, talking about myth making, this is a person that has some like radical ideas, also never shows their face. He's like super allure, mysterious.
Yeah, but she's very talkative. You can write to her on Facebook. She will write to you.
Yeah.
Also, in talking about myth making, just one last thing. It's really important, I think, to talk about like memes. Because like in the protests here and in the protests all around the world, I feel like a way that they create myths, that they extract ideas and like put them out there, and that's how people find about what's going on. It's like, it's no longer like just what people write, but it's like, oh, who wrote what, like that picture. That is a way that things are moving and flowing and happening.
And memes definitely is like of the whole like media powerhouse that like, you know, technology has created. Memes are definitely like the people, you know, the media of the people that we can create.
Because of their reach, you know, like because of like the reposting and like the embedding and the changing, it's a growing art, like it's a growing art form. And it's open to transformation too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I know we could like continue to have this conversation for hours and hours, and want to, of course, continue to be having these dialogues with you all individually. And I hope y'all as artists can stay connected and continue to ask questions of each other. I really hope that continues as well. I can't believe that we're already at time. And you know, if this were to happen in person, I would be giving each of you a hug, but neither of those things are possible at this point. So I'm going to give all of you a big virtual hug. And I just want to thank you so much, Juan Pablo. Thank you so much. Thanks to our ASL interpreters. Thank you so much. And I want to give a huge shout out to the Regiones Festival that has adapted to our times. Mobey, Natalia, Kai, Efrain, and Pablo, so much gratitude for your generosity and for spending time with me and with each other and with all of those who are joining us virtually this evening. Really appreciate your presence with us, and continue to keep in touch. I know there's so much else in store for the rest of the festival this week. On behalf of myself and the ancestors, be safe, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I don't know, Juan Pablo, if you have any closing words, but thank you so much, each of you, for chatting this evening.
I want to say the same thing. Thank you, especially to all the artists and you, Ali, for taking the time to talk about these things. I think the main thing that we want for Regiones is to provide perspective and, you know, highlight the voices of artists that are doing great work that is both political and also beautiful when you see it. So very happy to have you all. And as you can see, I'm at the park still. It's very, very dark. But sending everyone a big hug and hoping that we continue conversations. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.